What is the scariest, creepiest thing that has happened to you when you were home alone? Lived in a condo. In the middle of the night, I woke up to hear someone rattling my front door knob. No one had keys to my condo except me. Then, the door opened up, and I heard someone walking in. I was 100% sure I was being robbed. Fight or flight kicked in, and I flew out of bed and ran toward the front door screaming, "Get out of here!" which came out as complete gibberish as I had been sound asleep about 30 seconds prior and now had crazy adrenaline pumping through my veins. I was literally jumping around in my underwear screaming and waving my arms when it dawned on me that the two guys standing at my front door looked more scared than I have ever seen anyone. One of the guys held out some keys. His hands were visibly shaking and said something to the effect of his friend had given him the keys to his place and said he could stay there while he was out of town. Turns out the friend lived directly above me and these guys went to the wrong floor. The floors were not numbered and neither were the condo units, by mistake. They didn't know they were at the wrong door and that the keys were the same. I was able to get into his unit with my keys and they could open up my door with their keys. Needless to say, I was standing outside the hardware store the next day waiting for them to open so I could buy a new lock for my door. One of the first nights I was home alone with my brother. I was probably 13 or so. Parents went to a concert and left me in charge of my little brother. Just after he goes to bed there's a banging at the door. I'm terrified. I stay quiet and sneak to the window. It was a neighbor from up the road. We weren't friends. He's never been in my house before. I'm wondering why the F he wants to come in now. I stood on the other side of the door and said, "My parents aren't home. I can't open the door." Stupid, I know. Never let strangers know there are no adults around. He yells back, "It's getting dark, and I just wanted to let you know that your garage door is wide open." I felt like a schmuck, but I'm still alive. I was home alone after a dinner with my girlfriend. Around 3 AM I hear a very loud bang. My dog and I get out of bed to scope it out, hoping to find the reason for the noise. We searched for 15 to 20 minutes and could not find anything. We go back to bed and not 10 minutes later, bang, this time I'm shaking. It sounded like it was coming from the same spot. I spent the rest of night awake, not wanting to move. Found out the next day, girlfriend put 2 sparkling waters in the freezer to cool them down. Forgot about them, left the house, and never told me about them. They exploded. That kept me up all night. Not me, but my cousin. He was living in an apartment in a shady part of Madison, Wisconsin and some jerk-off was trying doors in his building. Was laying on the couch watching a movie, facing away from the door, when his front door opened. From the light in the hall he could make out a silhouette reflected in his TV, but he wasn't expecting anyone. He told me he was scared shitless and just said, loud and firm, without turning around, "Get the F out of here." Now, whoever it was did exactly that. I don't know what I would have done in that same situation. I was home alone with my toddler, getting ready for bed after putting her down for the night when I heard her call for me. So I went to her room and she was fast asleep. Weird. Maybe she had woken up for a moment and then passed out again. Got to the end of the hall before I heard her call for me in a panic. Rushed back in and she was still asleep in the same position. Sat with her for a few minutes and then made my way to bed when I heard my husband call my name. Must have come home from work early, so I go to him, but he's not there. Call him and confirm he's still at work and decide I must have hear a neighbor or something. Crawl into bed and hear my husband call for me again and then continue talking as if he's having a conversation with someone. Then hear my child calling me again and rush into her room. Still asleep. This goes on for a while until I decide I must really need some sleep and go back to bed with the lights on. Too freaked out to sleep, I was staring at a picture hanging on the wall when it disappeared. Like the wall just ate it? Look at another wall hanging, and the same thing happens. They would reappear when I looked away and then be eaten by the wall again when I looked directly at them. Decide I'm officially an insane person and call husband to come home. Fall asleep eventually and wake up and everything is normal, except my heart rate can't decide on a pace, swinging up and down between 30s 180s. Head into the hospital and I'm having a hypertensive crisis. Turns out it was the beta blockers I'd started recently. Nobody had heard of that reaction, so they kept me for a couple days until my numbers stabilized. No hallucinations after the first night other than hearing dogs bark randomly for a couple days. Not good times. I was 15. My mom was out for the night, and I was home studying. I had my headphones on, so I could listen to music while I was working. I guess it was around 9ish. My pencil rolled off the table, so I bent down to pick it up, and as I did, I looked toward the front door. The door knob was turning slowly, back and forth. Now, it's an old house and the door knob is old, but I know the way it unlocked from the outside, and with the key in, the knob only turns one way. I moved to the kitchen and called 911, almost eerily calm, and told them my name, address, that I was home alone, and someone was trying to come through my front door. Dispatch stayed on the line with me and said they were routing a helicopter to fly over. Did I have a dog? I did, and she told me to call the dog to the back door and then open the door and bring the dog in because they were going to use infrared on the backyard. I asked if that was safe. What if he was in the backyard? Her advice was to scream and she would notify the police en route that an assault was in progress. Yikes. So I called my poor little cocker spaniel to the door and pretty much threw him over my shoulder into the house before slamming and locking the door. Not much good it would do. That door had a single hung window in it. There was a large window next to it and a huge picture window in the living room. If someone wanted in, that deadbolt wasn't stopping much. Once I had the dog in, she told me she was going to hang up and call back in 5 minutes. In that 5 minutes, I was to call the place my mom was and get her to come home. I called, she was playing darts, so I told them to give the phone to her BF, and I told him what was going on. Apparently, he walked up to where my mom was playing, grabbed her and walked out of the bar. When the dispatcher called back, she gave me the names, descriptions, and badge numbers of the responding officers, and that she had informed them they were to hold their badges to the front window before the door would be unlocked for them. They showed up, showed me badges, and I opened the door. My mom was less than 5 minutes behind them, which considering SoCal traffic, means her BF broke a number of traffic laws to get there. That's when the police showed us the cigarette butts and footprints by the front window and the kitchen window, and the mud scraped off on the top of the gate that separated our front and backyards. Apparently, he had been watching me through the windows for quite a while before deciding to break in. 7-year-old me was playing with a doll I had got for my birthday in the doorway of my apartment on the 3rd floor of a 3-story building. My dad was outside in the parking lot working on his car as he often did, and me playing in the hall was pretty common as I had a friend who lived directly across from me who I was waiting to come home and play with. It was the 80s, so being unsupervised was more acceptable. Suddenly this man I've never seen before walked up the stairs and approached me asking where my parents were. I told him my dad's outside in the parking lot and my mom's at work. I assumed he was a friend of my sister who was in her 20s as he looked the same age. He said he couldn't just leave me alone and picked me up and threw me over his shoulder. I figured he was just overreacting and going to take me to my dad, but he made his way to the opposite door from the parking lot towards a side street where his car was. Just then my dad turned the corner, as he just happened to have gone over to the other side to secretly smoke a joint, and asked the guy what was going on. The guy put me down and said something about thinking I needed help and took off. My dad, being stoned, didn't really react beyond WTF. Okay. Kidnapping attempt foiled. My sister didn't know him, and she was living with a BF in another city. Not at home, but at the barn alone. I'm standing there grooming my horse, and out of nowhere I feel all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and my fight or flight response kicks in. I turn around, and there's a guy I don't know standing in the doorway looking at me with a creepy smirk on his face. He introduces himself as the boyfriend of a woman who keeps her horse at the farm and starts chatting and walking toward me. My normally very chill horse starts dancing around nervously and moves to position himself between me and the man before the man can get to me. I noped out of there and literally got on my horse and galloped off into the woods. 100% believe that man had ill intentions. I wasn't at home. I was working the night shift at a nursing home. I'm an RN, now disabled. It was just me and a CNA, and we were the only staff in the Alzheimer's unit. She had the TV on some stupid show about hauntings in America. She looks at me and says, "You'd think nursing homes would be haunted a lot because so many people die here." I just gave her a look and told her to shut up. This place is creepy enough at night. We go to do rounds on a resident who was in the process of passing. She was on hospice and her family was aware. I checked on her every 15 minutes because I didn't want her to be in pain and to see if she was in distress. At this time, she wasn't in distress, but it was obvious she wasn't going to last much longer. Her family lived across the country and had requested not to be called past 9 p.m. So, I stayed with her and held her hand and read to her from the Bible as she was a devout Catholic. After all of the aftercare was finished, the CNA and I had been in the room for 15 minutes. I left to call the funeral home and all of that. I'd barely dialed the phone number when the CNA came running down the hallway and said, "She's breathing again." I don't know what to do. She was obviously freaked and her face was pale. I went to the resident's room and she was definitely breathing. I checked vital signs and though everything was much lower than normal levels, they were there. I'd checked them several times after she'd passed, and there had been no blood pressure, no pulse, no anything. She lived for another 5 years and claimed she'd met God. This is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. One night when I was about 12 or 13, my parents were gone for a while, and I was just staying up really late, past midnight, on my desktop computer waiting for them to come home. Like most people, I had been told a million times not to talk to strangers on the internet, but about half my friends list on MSN were people I had never met before, so I was just chatting with a bunch of them. Out of nowhere, one of my online friends had told me exactly what I had been doing the past hour or two. Egg, what I was eating, drinking, playing with, when I had gotten up last. Things I hadn't mentioned in chat. I instantly got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. My desktop was set up in front of a big window, so as far as I knew, this person I had been talking to, that was supposed to live in a different country than me, had found my address and been watching me through the window. Turns out, he had somehow hacked into my webcam. I always left it plugged in, even though I had been warned not to when I wasn't using it, and had been frequently watching me through it whenever he wanted. It's been 10 years, and I still have all the cameras on my devices covered in thick duct tape.